What's cracking, people? It's your man Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, representing high-level technicians operating globally and beyond. So listen, today I wanted to continue in the series of the Select Men's roster with the profile of the healer. Now, in the previous installation of this particular series, we covered the profile of the ride or die. I'm going to leave a link to that particular podcast down below. Now, the thing to note about the profile of the healer is that this concept is something that was presented a while ago in a series that I did on Select Man's mental health, or restoring the crown. And basically, within this 3-part series, I covered the balance that's required, the balance of approach that is required in order to approach restorative, sustainable, holistic mental health and physical health and energetic well-being in a holistic way in this modern space. And part of that series spoke about having a healer within your circle of feminine energy providers, aka the Select Man's roster. And just to be clear, along with the healer includes the creative. When we talk about dancers, we talk about musicians, actresses, and writers. Now, keep in mind, and I will continue to repeat this throughout this series, that even though you have women in your life that provide value, and remember, it's all about a value exchange. It's more than just having sexual access to a woman or not having sexual access. You see, there are roster positions in a Select Man's life that provide a space of intellectual, energetic, material, and ultimately cultural exchanges of value between you and a high-value woman. You see, when you're of the pre-select and select mentality, it is by nature an abundance mindset. You're not looking at every single woman as a sex object. Don't get me wrong. We enjoy and revel in the company of beautiful, accomplished, intellectual, talented, creative, maternal women. That's one of the beauties and values of being a masculine master. You see, the masculine master is the complete man, and he understands that if it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different women just in that aspect of his life to supply him with the balancing elements that he requires for his way of life and in his world, so be it. Or if he'd rather be alone and off on his journey of solitude, of introspection, of quiet reflection, that is his choice. There's no pressure to be around or sleep with or to acquire, as many women or as many things, material objects, or even external experiences as possible. But those are deeper elements that we'll get into in another space. But today we're going to talk about the profile of the healer. Now, when we talk about the octane rating for the healer, it is very diverse. It goes from 87 to 89 and to the diesel. This is because the healer / creative doesn't necessarily find her way within the modern world or the mechanized world or the matrix, if you want to classify it that way. The healer / creative can be a singer, a musician, which in and of itself requires a level of diva energy, which is attractive. However, it can be a little challenging to most men. That's why it takes a man of a certain caliber and a level of confidence to be able to manage that energy. Notice I said manage, because to think that you can have a relationship in the traditional sense of the word with a singer or a musician who's always on the go, who's on the road, who's always writing, who's always having these extremes and emotional output, would be naive. And that's why these types of relationships are managed in doses. And that's why the creative slash healer has a ranking of 3 on a select man's roster. Now that we've covered the singer slash musician, and also we can put the writer into that category, because writers are the type of creatives that have great conversation. They're more introspective than most. They have a formulated opinion. So writers, to have a writer on your creative team means that you have a well-read, well-spoken, thoughtful person who you can have those late night conversations with, who you can discuss opposing positions with, but always come out with some type of consensus at the end. And that's a powerful person to have on your team. But beyond those aspects of the creatives, let's briefly touch upon the dancer. And I'm not necessarily talking about the exotic dancer per se. I'm talking about the ballet dancer, the modern dancer, the traditional dancer. And gentlemen, if you've ever dated or interacted with this type of woman on any level, you understand really what's at the essence of creative expression for women. And this means that her body is her communication tool. Her body is her canvas. Her body is her art. And so dancers tend to be more expressive. They tend to be more emotive. And let me tell you, that energy is unlike any other. So for all the pre-select guys out there and the newly minted select guys out there, when you take your time to seek out different venues in your locality that you've not been to, like the ballet theater or the theater for modern dance, or the cultural heritage theaters within your city or state, you've opened the door for an entirely new and different and innovative scene and type of energy from women, from the feminine expression that you probably previously were not exposed to, let alone the women who are taking liberal arts and theater in college. So you've got that 1-2 punch. You've got, the 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 year olds, but also in the throes of their creative development. And gentlemen, let me tell you, if you've never had a sensual interaction with a dancer, a modern dancer, a ballet dancer, or traditional dancer, stay tuned. Switch over to the Patreon side. I'm going to break that down for you. It is something that is to be beheld. Okay, trust me. But moving on, we've discussed the creative side of this particular dynamic in this profile. But let's take a look at the healer dynamic. And remember, again, like I said, I'm going to link the healer series that I did some months ago in the description of this particular podcast. But when we talk about getting with a healer and adding a healer to your roster, now we're delving into the more holistic, the more regenerative, the more balancing aspect of your roster position. And this is why she actually has rank. The rank is third for a reason, but she does have rank above the remaining roster spots on the select man's roster. This is because healers are energy workers, and healers come in a variety of modality, and the benefits are the following. She usually has a remedy for most things. She's in touch with that equilibrium. And remember what I said in other videos, the alpha end game is to establish equilibrium of his environment. When we talk about healing modalities that a feminine woman can bring to your space, that is the equilibrium of the ecosystem. So remember, the man brings the environment. The woman brings the ecosystem within that environment. And when we talk about the healer on your roster, she definitely does that, whether her modality is through yoga, whether her modality is herbology, whether her modality is meditation. There are so many aspects to just this one subject or this one area that we can have a discussion that lasts for hours and hours and hours. But I just wanted to briefly touch on why this particular aspect is important, because all the time that we spend conquering our environment, navigating the various channels of our space, and ultimately seeking to make our way in the world, we need emotional, spiritual, intuitive resets so that our balance and our equilibrium can be maintained, so that we can come back to our space of centering, which ultimately resets our world rhythm. Now, that's a concept that's a bit advanced for most people, but you go over to the Patreon side, get into the higher levels. That is what we discuss on the regular. Getting your world rhythm in line, setting up those aspects, and using your roster as a benefit and as a balancing position so that you can go about completing your mission and moving forward with your legacy. Now, gentlemen, don't get me wrong. All of these things and having these various roster positions does have their other side, their balancing side. We want to say pros and cons, but it's really about balancing. If you have a lot of positive, you're going to have to balance that with the challenges that comes with that positive. And when we talk about healers, the majority of them are not able to exist in the matrix, which is attractive but must be supported. So if you find yourself in a relationship, and a lot of gentlemen who have found themselves in relationships, whatever the dynamic is, with a healer, you find that she may not be able to maintain a quote-unquote traditional job, be it in sales, be it in corporate America, be it in retail, be it in whatever type of job space. And she requires a bit of entrepreneurship, or she requires sponsorship. So keep those things in mind when you seek to expand your roster, just as something to be realistic about. If you're going to approach this, you have to approach this with honesty and a bit of realism if you really want to have success at maintaining this particular roster position. Now, finally, for the pre-select gentlemen who are in the audience, I want to leave these two things with you. One, we definitely get into the sex magic part on the Patreon side. That is a huge benefit in terms of the balancing process. I've already got videos posted on the Patreon side regarding that aspect, but also the ability to manifest things via the healer on your roster is extremely important. High-level guys, masters of the universe, already know this principle, that that whole think and grow rich principle to transmutation and manifestation. That's also included. But lastly, keep this point in mind. If you can, this is if you're already in a relationship or you're entertaining a healer. If you can hear her calling you or feel an almost electric jolt just before she calls, texts, or appears from around the corner, you may need to start discussing boundaries. All right, I'm gonna put that out there. I'm gonna let you think about what that means. Holler at me in the comment section if you have an idea about what I mean when I say that. But gentlemen, as always, this is your man Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, saying stay sharp and mission focused. Later.